Hello everyone, welcome to D20 in Disguise, your source for expertise on world building, storytelling, and miniature making. Now in today's video, we're going to be asking a very common and also very important question, which many people just getting started out with D&D or just letting someone else get started out with D&D commonly ask. What is D&D? Now this is a very complex question, and it deserves a very complex answer because there are so many sides to D&D. So in this video, which hopefully shouldn't be long, I'm aiming for under 5 minutes. But anyway, I'm going to be taking each side of D&D, breaking it down into smaller chunks, and then making a large overall definition at the end of the video. The timestamp to when I actually have that final definition will be in the description, but I highly recommend for staying around for the rest of the video so you can see each part of D&D alone and better understand what D&D is as a whole. Also, I will be answering the dreaded question. The dreaded question that really should not be asked as often as it is. Is D&D demonic or demon worship? And the answer is no. But it's a complicated answer, so I'll be explaining it later for sure. If any of you end up enjoying today's video, then please be sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss a single one of my videos. But without further ado, let's get right into today's video. Welcome to D20 in Disguise. So, to begin breaking apart what D&D actually is, let's start with a simple term. Tabletop role-playing game. D&D is a tabletop role-playing game, but that term is slightly confusing and has multiple words which can be confused with other terms. So, let's go word by word to understand what a tabletop role-playing game really is. Firstly, you have tabletop. Now, this goes in depth to a certain aspect of D&D, that it's commonly played in person. Yes, unlike many games of this digital age, D&D is commonly played in person, with multiple people gathered around a table playing D&D in person. Now obviously with the pandemic and COVID stuff, online D&D has become much more necessary and much more common. But for the most part in normal times, in-person D&D is very common. Now, tabletop also means that D&D is played around a table. Now, the table is used for something very specific, which I'll come back to later, but it's a good thing to note. Next, we have role-playing. This is a very important aspect of D&D. In D&D, you are not yourself. You are role-playing, you are acting as someone else. Some imaginary person in an imaginary world. Kind of like make-believe, but much more structured. The person that you're role-playing is commonly referred to as a character, and there are two types of characters: non-player characters and player characters. And this is a very important distinction to make. And it also segues into another very important part of D&D. Who all is involved? First, you have a group of people called the players. Now, the players roleplay a single character as a player character specifically. And together, all of the players and their player characters make up the adventuring party. Now, the adventuring party explores a fantasy world, explores the stories in that world, meets the people in that world, and overall has a good time. Just goofing off, really. That's what D&D is at its core. It is a game. It's not serious. It's not real. It's just having fun with friends. However, these things do bring up a few questions. namely, who created the world, who created the stories in that world, and who created the people in that world. Now this leads directly into the second group of people involved in D&D, the Dungeon Master. Now the Dungeon Master designs the world, designs the stories in that world, designs the people in that world for the adventuring party, the player characters and the players, to explore and adventure through and meet. Now the Dungeon Master is a very crucial role in D&D. Without the Dungeon Master, it really is just make-believe. And really, in the long run, the Dungeon Master's main goal is to let all of the players have fun. That is their main goal. The Dungeon Master also has other roles, such as understanding the many rules of the game and helping the players understand them to the best of their ability. Now this leads into why D&D is not make-believe, because it's structured. It has rules. For example, in combat, somebody can only move and take an action, and that action can be multiple things, such as attacking, dashing, defending, guarding themselves, hiding, many different things. And this is just a small piece of the many rules of D&D which make it feel realistic, or at least somewhat realistic. This also segues into what the table at D&D is actually for. Now, the table at D&D is usually gridded. It usually has some sort of gridded surface, gridded board, gridded mat, something like that. And this is a physical, miniature representation of a small part of this fantasy world. For example, let's say that the player characters are in a tavern having a drink, when suddenly a bar brawl breaks out and they're caught in the middle of it. Now, that would be a combat encounter. Combat would probably ensue from that. So, perhaps on the gridded board on the table, that small tavern would be represented with a miniature, and there would be small little miniatures on that board representing each of the player characters, each of the NPCs, each of the non-player characters involved in that bar brawl. So as you can see, D&D is simply a somewhat realistic representation of the real world in game form, but you can make whatever you want out of it. The Dungeon Master has full freedom to make the setting of the world fantasy, or modern, or futuristic, or sci-fi, or dystopian, or whatever. They have complete freedom, and they usually listen to the players to get their feedback on what the players want to play. So, now that we understand most major aspects of D&D, let's start forming a final definition. D&D is a game where a group of people gather together, whether in person or virtually, and role-play a group of imaginary people in a fantasy world. The Dungeon Master oversees the creation of this fantasy world and the filling out of it with people, places, story hooks, and the like. And there you have it. As you can see, D&D is a very broad game. And that segues into the dreaded question. Is D&D demonic or evil? And the answer is 99% of the time, no. Now, don't just assume that that 1% is most of the time. It isn't. You have to look into the aspects of D&D to understand the answer fully. Now, think about it. The Dungeon Master has a freedom to create whatever they want to create. They can create whatever kind of setting they want. And that means they can make it demonic and evil if they want to. But most GMs, 99% of GMs, won't do that. They won't. And if you're concerned about that, you should probably talk to your game master or your dungeon master and ask them, what's your plan for the campaign? Is it going to include anything demonic or evil or anything like that? And if they say, well, maybe it might devolve into that, then you can find a different group. But if they say, no, I'm definitely not planning for anything like that, then you're completely good. The best thing you can do is not make assumptions and instead ask questions. I absolutely hate that stereotype, that automatic assumption that D&D is somehow demonic, somehow evil, when firstly you don't even know what D&D is, and secondly you haven't asked questions. It makes me slightly angry, but you know, I'm happy that I'm able to inform people through this video and help them understand and help them ask more questions. Because if there's any pitfall here when you're starting out playing in D&D, it is not asking enough questions about the game. Anyway, I think that just about covers it for what D&D is. Now if y'all enjoyed the video, then please, once again, don't forget to hit all of those buttons down below. You know what I'm talking about. And please, if you found today's video educational or informational, then please be sure to comment that down below. I always read through your guys' comments, and I just love seeing the positive feedback which you give. Anyway, you all have a great day. Keep on creating, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.